You want to
Hey,
appreciate. We really
thanks,
appreciate
Eddie.
you being here.
Um, yeah, my name's Greg Gaar. I've lived in San Francisco all my life, except for 4 years when I was in the Navy, which was hell, but I survived. Um, and I'm very connected, as most CNPS members are, with the land. And what's really unique about having a connection with the land is, first of all, this planet is the only place in the universe that we know of where life exists. So it's a very special place. I'm sure that life exists somewhere way out there, but we haven't found it yet. And so that makes this planet extremely important. And when you start having doing habitat restoration, planting, weeding, having a relationship with the land, even in an urban area, once you keep going back to that same location all the time and watching it evolve and seeing the birds and the bees and the butterflies, it becomes very spiritually rewarding. And in this day and age, when there's so much negativity happening with Trump and all, um, it's good to have some positive things happening in your life. And the most positive things that happen in my life are having a relationship with the land and trying to restore the land for biodiversity. So, we're going to look at historic photos and sketches of San Francisco. This first picture shows it's from the book The Ohlone Way by Malcolm Margolin, who recently passed away, unfortunately. But this book is a treasure, describing what San Francisco was like prior to the arrival of the Europeans in 1769. San Francisco and the Bay Area was one of the richest ecosystems on the face of the earth, with grizzly bears and mountain lions, great herds of elk, deer, antelope, flocks of geese and pelicans flying overhead, and a great diversity of native plant communities, including tidal marshes, freshwater marshes, oak woodlands, uh, grasslands, dune scrub, just an amazing place that it once was. And the California Native Plant Society is doing all it can to try to protect what still survives and to try to enhance those areas to preserve biodiversity in the Bay Area and in the state of California. It's important to realize that if you go back 15,000 years ago, at the tail end of the last ice age, sea level was 350 feet below what it is today. And this would be a view of what the Golden Gate would have looked like 10,000 years ago. Can we get rid of this over here, Linda? I'm sorry, I don't want to look at myself on the screen.
Can we get rid of the video? Let's see. Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
Oh, um, so here's a grizzly bear going down to what would be a riverbed rather than a great bay. You could practically walk to the Farallones 15,000 years ago. And the native people made their way down to California by going across from Siberia, across the Bering Straits to Alaska, and then down the coast of California. But we don't know when they actually got here. The reason why is because with sea level 350 feet below what it is today, the campsites where there would be arrowheads or bones of native people or shell mounds are now under the ocean or under the bay. So archaeologists would have to go underwater to find out exactly when the first native people arrived here. It's not working. Oh, thank you. This is another sketch from the Ohlone Way showing the Ramatash Ohlone people camped out along a creek or along the bay shore. And of course, they were very connected to the land. They worshiped the land. They worshiped the animals. And it's unfortunate that in this day and age, modern urban people, in most cases, do not have any connection with the land. So they're missing out on a lot of things that could be very positive in their lives. This is a painting that was done of the native people at Mission Dolores in 1816 to show you they look like hippies on Haight Street, right? Not quite, but they used all the natural plants and animals and used it for their clothing, their headdresses, etc. Unfortunately, what happened to the native people, and this is kind of analogous to what happens to native plants and native animals, and that is when the Europeans arrived, they brought diseases from Europe that the native people had no immunity to, like smallpox, influenza, and other diseases that killed off many of the native people. And as I said, it's very similar to how invasive exotic species such as plants and animals, oxalis, Ehrharte recta, etc., eucalyptus, come from other parts of the world and can rapidly destroy native plant communities. That's one of the reasons that we go out there and do habitat restoration by trying to control the invasive exotic species to protect the native plant communities that support the native butterflies, the native birds, the native bees, etc. This is Nancy Morita's map that was done many years ago, showing what San Francisco would have looked like in 1769. And you can see the great sand dunes spreading from the ocean all the way across the tip of the peninsula, and creeks flowing down off the mountains and down into the bay. This would be Islas Creek. Pretty amazing. And we'll look at some of these native plant communities with photographs. This is a photograph by Willard Warden taken in 1910 showing the sand dunes and an interdune pond about where Sunset Boulevard would be today. We're looking west to the ocean. And if you look closely down here, you can see footprints of wildlife that went to the pond to drink the fresh water that had accumulated there. Of course, this is all gone now. There are remnants. The chain of lakes would be a remnant interdune pond system, but it's been very much altered since the original sand dunes were here. This is another Willard Warden picture looking down to Ocean Beach. This would be Carville, which was a community of abandoned streetcars and cable cars that were turned into a village adjacent at the foot of Judah and Kirkham Streets, Irving Streets. There's still 2 or 3 of these cable car houses that are situated out near Ocean Beach, but they've been covered over with shingles and look like they're fairly modern structures. But underneath, there's old cable cars, because I've actually gone inside of one. You can see one of the windmills out by Ocean Beach. Here's some of the sand dunes, another Willard Warden photograph. You can see Lupinus chamasonis right here, beech sagewort, a lot of sagewort seedlings in the dunes. So the sand dunes were not a barren sand waste. They were a very rich and very diverse native plant community. And where did all this sand come from? That's always the question that I had when I was a kid, when we used to go out and collect sand and put it in our sandbox in our backyard, probably destroying rare and endangered plants at the time. But where did all this sand come from? Well, it's granite sand. It's from the Sierra Nevada mountains, and erosion from wind, rain, glacier action, and later hydraulic mining caused the sand, the granite sand, to flow down through the San Joaquin and Sacramento River into what would become San Francisco Bay. And in its earlier incarnation, it was a river valley. And the sand then, through tidal action, would wash out through the Golden Gate, and then the northwesterly winds would blow the sand across the tip of San Francisco Peninsula. And it's still coming in, and especially as sea level rises because of human impact, global warming, the sand will advance even further because the ocean will rise higher and higher. This is the view of the sand dunes, stabilized sand dunes out at Balboa and 33rd Avenue in 1912. This is from the book of the Sutro Estate, all the land that was owned by Adolf Sutro that would be available for purchasing for real estate development. This is a lady walking her dog on the sand dunes where George Washington High School would be built in the Richmond district. And this picture was probably taken around 1910. And way in the background back here would be where the VA hospital is today, Fort Miley. And you can see all the architecture. Some of these houses are still out there. This is looking across the sand, mostly stabilized sand dunes of the inner Sunset from Strawberry Hill in Golden Gate Park. Down here, you can see the tracks of the steam train that ran from Hayton Stanton Street all the way to Ocean Beach. And if you want a slice of pizza, you would go to Arizmendi, which would be right about here, near 9th and in between Irving and Judah. So this would be 8th Avenue here. Laguna Honda Canyon would be down in the valley. This is Mount Sutro, earlier called Mount Parnassus by Adolf Sutro. Mount Davidson in the background. And you can see the big rock formation that's on Mount Davidson as where the Nootka reed grass is today. It sticks out very prominently. This is looking in 1936 where the Sunset Reservoir would be built. And this would be around where Lincoln High School is. And they're planning to build the Sunset Reservoir right here. But you can see, again, the diversity of native plants that would all be scraped away when the reservoir was built. A participant as in Linda. Oh, okay. I X'd it out. I'm just getting notifications. Okay, so we're looking north. There's Mount Tamalpais in the background, Golden Gate Park, and the Richmond district. Technology. This is another view from the site, the proposed site of the Sunset Reservoir, as we're looking over to Golden Gate Heights and you can see Grandview Park and the rocks at 14th and Ortega. And it's totally amazing that this sand came all the way from the ocean and then went up and over 850-foot tall intercoastal range and then dropped down into the valley below where Laguna Honda is. So probably no place in the Western Hemisphere did sand from the ocean go up and over 850 feet over a mountain and then drop down on the other side. That's pretty amazing. This is Grandview Park at 14th and Ortega as it looked in 1927. The trees were planted by Carl Larson, who owned Larson's Chicken Ranch, which I'll show you a picture of later. And this is looking down to Grandview Park from the rock outcrop at 14th and Ortega. And this would be about 1928, as they were just starting to build retaining walls and roadways around Grandview. You can see Strawberry Hill in the background and the Richmond district. This is looking from Grandview Park down to Noriega and 19th Avenue in 1899, showing Carl Larson's Chicken Ranch. And Larson, when he passed away, he left a lot of his land to the children of San Francisco, where Charlie Sava Pool is and Larson Park. There's a big chert boulder with an inscription about Carl Larson, and it's sitting there right by Larson Park on 19th Avenue. So here we're on the other side of Golden Gate Heights, and right here at this intersection is 7th and Lawton Street. This is 8th Avenue here. The Garden for the Environment would be right in this location. My grandmother's house is right there. So when I was a kid, we used to play all over these sand hills, which was a lot of fun, although I remember throwing a rock and hitting my brother in the head, which I'm very apologetic about. And here's the same view. In 1995, I took this from a Kodachrome slide and scanned it, so you can see the evolution of the site, or de-evolution, depending on your chain of thought. And of course, Golden Gate Heights is where the green hair streak butterfly exists. It's a rare butterfly, and the Golden Gate Heights, Sunset Heights, a lot of the open spaces are now planted with native plants that support the green hair streak, including its larval food plant, which is the coast buckwheat. This is from the mural at across the street from Forest Hill Station, depicting the history of Laguna Honda Canyon. These are the rocks, Franciscan Radiolarian chert rocks at Ortega near 15th Avenue, where we have a lot of work parties. And it is one of the 32 natural areas that have been acquired by the city over the years with money from the park and open space acquisition and oh, we got a problem here too. Okay. Well, anyway, here's a picture in 1925. And here's the same view today. The same rocks are still there. These Franciscan Radiolarian chert rocks were formed under an ocean off the coast of South America and made their way up the coast of the Western Hemisphere along the Pacific tectonic plate. And it slowly moved over 130 million years up to San Francisco today. This is another view from the top of the rocks looking at Erysimum franciscanum, the San Francisco wallflower, of which this picture was taken again in 1995. There are very few wallflower up there today, although I'm sure that the Natural Resources Division and the Native Plant Society will be planting more wallflower up there as the plants are propagated. Now, we also have serpentine rock, which is the official mineral of the state of California, that crosses diagonally across San Francisco from the Presidio to Lone Mountain to where the Mint is at the Boson Market, to Potrero Hill, to Hunter's Point. That's all serpentine rock. And this is Star King Park on Potrero Hill with a wonderful display of serpentine rock. Now, this is at Ocean Avenue and Juniper Serra. Commodore Sloat School would be right here. And we're looking north to Hawk Hill. Hawk Hill is one of the 32 natural areas acquired with park and open space funds over the years. And it is managed by the Natural Resource Division of Rec and Park. So this would be St. Francis Wood, and over here would be the trees of, I've lost it. Go forward. And again, this is Hawk Hill. And this is the Twin Peaks Tunnel under construction on West Portal. Hopefully the technology will continue to work. So Hawk Hill, the year is 1916. And on Hawk Hill, we have dune tansy looking to Lincoln High School in the background. And here's the Erysimum franciscanum, the San Francisco wallflower on Hawk Hill. An Indian paintbrush with Mount Davidson in the background. And it was a big fight to save Hawk Hill back in the 1980s. And this is Hawk Hill, and these are kids playing basketball at Herbert Hoover Middle School. And their mascot is the hawk, and they actually do habitat restoration up on Hawk Hill. This is the view from where Lincoln High School would be built. And you can see dune tansy all over the sand dunes right here. And all the native plants in here in the dune scrub community with Edge Hill Mountain, Mount Davidson, Sherwood Forest, and St. Francis Wood in the background. This is taken in 1937. And we continue to follow the sand dunes as we head in an easterly direction. This would be right above Masonic and Geary Boulevard. This is Calvary Cemetery in the foreground, the Catholic cemetery, and in the background is Laurel Hill Cemetery. And that's a monument to Senator Broderick, who was killed in a duel with Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Terry, in 1854, I believe. So this picture was taken around 1875, and there were 4 cemeteries out there that were close to Lone Mountain, which was Laurel Hill Cemetery, originally called Lone Mountain Cemetery, Calvary Cemetery, Masonic Cemetery, and Oddfellows Cemetery. Now we go down to Sans Souci Valley. Sans Souci Valley, which means in French, carefree valley, is the valley where the Lower Haight and the Debauche Triangle are located. So this would be Herman Street, and the photographer would be standing where the Mint is today at near Debauche and Market. And this, as I said, is Herman Street, and this would be Fillmore Street here, and the year is 1862. Alamo Square would be right there, Lone Mountain in the background. So Haight Street would go right up this way. Divisadero would be right here, and Buena Vista Park would be just out of the picture. And here's the same view taken in 1905. Exact same spot. So you can see that the dune community, the dune scrub community, has all but disappeared, but we may have lost our natural heritage, but here is our architectural heritage. All these Victorians, gorgeous buildings, most of which still survive today because the 1906 earthquake and fire, the fire never got this far. And so this was all preserved. And as I said, most of these buildings are still there today. And this is one of the earliest photographs taken of San Francisco in 1851. So we're looking from Nob Hill to Russian Hill with Alcatraz in the background. And Columbus Avenue, originally called Montgomery Avenue, would be in the deepest part of this valley. Of course, you probably recognize this lake. This is Mountain Lake as it looked in 1899, before the roadway was built to the Golden Gate Bridge. And it has been beautifully restored by the National Park Service, although it was in pretty bad shape 25 years ago. Can we get rid of all this stuff up here? Okay, forget it. Okay, we got some technical problems, as I knew we would. In the old days, I used to give slideshows. They were a lot easier to do. Okay, smaller. Just leave it like that, Linda. That's fine.
You want to make it a little bigger?
No, I don't want it bigger because I'm cropping it off.
Go ahead.
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Sorry, people.
It looks great on this end. We're not seeing what you're seeing. We're just
What's
seeing
that,
the
Eddie?
pictures. Well, it looks great on this end. We're just seeing the slideshow, and that's
Okay.
all. You're
Well, I'll
all
do the
good,
best
man.
I can. It's badly cropped, but I'll keep working. So this is Mountain Lake in 1899. And here it is badly cropped as it looked in the 1930s. Thank you. Just leave it like that. And here's when they were building the roadway to the Golden Gate Bridge. They took all the debris from the roadway, and that's fine. Leave it like that. Leave it like that, please. They took all the debris from the roadway and just dumped it into Mountain Lake. And also, they allowed all the water to go down into Mountain Lake. So it took with it uh, oil, gasoline, asbestos from brake shoes, and it all went into Mountain Lake. So badly polluting the lake. And as I said, the National Park Service had to restore the lake. So the water from Mountain Lake was used for drinking water in the early days of San Francisco. They also used water from Lobos Creek. And there was a redwood flume, which you can see in this picture, that took the water all the way from Mountain Lake, Baker Beach, all the way around the Golden Gate to Black Point. This is Fort Mason, Black Point. This would be Ghirardelli Square today. This building is still there. And then there was a pumping station that would pump the water up to a reservoir on Russian Hill. And then you could subscribe to the private water service because there was no San Francisco Water Department until 1930. And this is that same slope that we just saw in this picture on Black Point and the Jeremiah O'Brien Liberty ship in the background. But this is the remnant of San Francisco's original bay shore with the jaggedy rocks, and it's still there today. Most of San Francisco's original bay shore has been destroyed, but this is a remnant that still survives today. This is Lobos Creek flowing through the Presidio in 1920. Lobos Creek Valley, which has been beautifully restored again by the National Park Service. This is looking down to Lobos Creek, traveling to Baker Beach among the coast live oak trees. These are students from Washington High School doing habitat restoration on Lobos Creek. And here's the restoration in 1995 after the slope was restored. This is another part of the Presidio, the Tennessee Hollow watershed, which has been also restored by the National Park Service, where they took the water out of culverts and allowed it to flow freely all the way to the tidal marsh at Crissy Field. And El Polen Springs is back here. And the story is, of course, if women would drink the water from El Polen Springs, that they would have lots of children. And we're looking to Washerwoman's Lagoon from Russian Hill, looking down into the Cow Hollow district with the Presidio in the background. This is Strawberry Island. Crissy Field would occupy all of this. Washerwoman's Lagoon was used for laundries, and then this became Cow Hollow, and they used it for slaughterhouses and for dairies. And because of that, people caught diseases like cholera. And one of the people who caught cholera was the son of Ephraim Burr, who led the fight to get the slaughterhouses and the nurseries out of Cow Hollow and moved them to the southeastern part of San Francisco, which became Butchertown. And Ephraim Burr eventually became the mayor of San Francisco. But in order to become the mayor, he lost his son, who died of cholera because of the bad water in Cow Hollow and possibly Washerwoman's Lagoon as well. Here we are looking from Pacific Heights down to Washerwoman's Lagoon. This was the photo that was on the website. You can see Fort Mason in the background, Alcatraz, the sand dunes. and all these coast live oak trees, which are some of the native trees of San Francisco. This is Laguna Seca at Parnassus and Cole Streets, part of the William Ferdinand Lang Dairy. This picture was taken in 1894. I got the picture from the granddaughter of William Ferdinand Lang. When she was in her 90s, she had a photo album, and this picture was in the photo album. And it shows also in the background, you can see the Metropolitan Powerhouse that powered the second electric streetcar in San Francisco. The first electric streetcar was built by Barrett Juice. Strawberry Hill in the background. These two houses are still on Carl Street. Now we're looking at Islas Creek flowing through Glen Canyon in 1892 from a photo album by Alfred Nobby Clark, who had this pumping station in Glen Canyon, which pumped the water from Islas Creek all the way to Clark's Water Works in Eureka Valley. And with the money he made on selling water, he built the big Victorian Queen Anne at Caselli and Douglas Streets, which still stands today. And here's another view of Glen Canyon. This would be about where the baseball fields are. And Elk Street would come down here. There's the powerhouse, and you can see the water of Islas Creek, which flowed all the way to San Francisco Bay. It still flows to San Francisco Bay, but unfortunately, about at this point, it goes into a culvert or storm drain, and it's all underground. And look at the vegetation. It's covered with Douglas iris and long-petaled iris. And this is the celebration, Admission Day, September 9th, 1898, showing Islas Creek, the Presidio band playing on the bridge, going over Islas Creek. And this is where Islas Creek would go into San Francisco Bay. The view is from Bernal Heights looking south. So the farmers market would be right around the bend, right over here. So you had fresh water and salt water meeting, which is one of the richest ecosystems that you can have. And here is Islas Creek being put into a culvert or a storm drain. If we were to actually daylight this creek, we would have to remove Alamany Boulevard and 280 because they go right above the culvert. This is the old Simpson Bible College on Silver Avenue and Mount St. Joseph in the background. And here's a remnant of Islas Creek back in Glen Canyon as people are looking at I think this was a Jake Sig walking tour, as a matter of fact, back in the 1990s. Now we're looking at Dolores Lagoon at the foot of the Jewish cemetery where Dolores Park is today. Water from Twin Peaks would come down 18th Street and Caselli Street. That was called Dolores Creek, and it would flow into Dolores Lagoon, and then it would flow all the way out to San Francisco Bay via Mission Creek. So as I said, there were 3 Jewish cemeteries where Dolores Park is situated today. And here's a photograph of the Jewish cemetery. You can see some of the same tombs. You can see this building here and this building here, right there. And get that dog on a leash. And during the 1906 earthquake and fire, people fled to what was called Mission Park, although it hadn't really been developed yet. But they were fleeing the fire as it was approaching Mission High School. This is Dolores Street. So this would be Dolores and 18th. This is the old Mission High School, which would survive the fire of 1906, but would then burn down in 1923. And then they would build the Mission High School, which is there today. Again, a view of the fire after the 1906 earthquake as it's burning huge amounts of San Francisco. It burned for 3 days, destroying most of the city and leaving 250,000 people out of a population of 420,000 homeless. Again, there's Mission High School. This is the view from where the Mint would be today. And this would be where UC Extension would be built. This building is still there at what is that? Golf and Market, and that's the city hall that was completely destroyed by the earthquake alone, and then it would burn in the fire as well. And here's the view from approximately the same spot. You can see the smokestack of the powerhouse of the Castro and H Street cable car has collapsed. The H Street cable car would never run again after the 1906 earthquake. The Castro cable car would run again, but it would not go the entire distance to the ferry building as it had prior to the earthquake. And here's a view from a ferry boat as the city's burning in the background with the prominent ferry building. This is one of my favorite pictures of the 1906 earthquake. It's taken up where Ina Colbreth Park is today. And these girls are giggling at the photographer as the city's burning in the background. Now we're looking at two lakes here. This is Laguna Puerca, and this is Lake Merced. And this is a racetrack. And Laguna Puerca is located still today in Stern Grove. Well, let's see. We'll look at Lake Merced first. Let's go back. Lake Merced, Laguna Puerca, which is now called Pine Lake. And here we are looking from the Ingleside district to Lake Merced. Juniper Serra Boulevard will be right here. And this photo was taken around 1915. And here's Lake Merced as they were planting lots of trees with Fort Funston in the background. And this is the flume that would carry water. This picture was taken by the Spring Valley Water Company in 1904. And this is also Lake Merced. They're doing a lot of restoration work at Lake Merced. The Natural Resources Division, as well as the Native Plant Society, have regular work parties out at Lake Merced. And over the last couple of years, over 800 eucalyptus, pine, cypress, and black-wooded acacia have been removed so that more water would flow into the lake, because those trees would just suck up all the water. And you could then have more riparian plants growing next to the lake rather than Cape ivy and English ivy. Again, Lake Merced, around 1910. And the impacts of automobiles on Lake Merced Boulevard, killing the wildlife. Sorry I had to show you that picture, but I do not own a car and I'm not a big fan of the impacts of the automobile. This is one of the tributaries of Lake Merced that supplies water to Lake Merced. This is Brotherhood Way as it looked in 1958. The photo was taken by Peter Rupsoff for the book The Flora of San Francisco, written in 1958. And this is before all the churches, the synagogue were built in this area that would destroy most of this riparian corridor. You can see the Park Merced Towers in the background. And up where the area is still intact, you can see Jake Sig looking at the rosy eye manzanita. This picture was taken in 1995. Very rare plant for San Francisco. There's not many manzanitas still surviving in San Francisco. We'll show you some in a few minutes. And this is Laguna Puerca, Pine Lake, and Stern Grove. Now, the reason this lake is here, this whole canyon where Stern Grove exists today was carved by Trocadero Creek that ran through here for thousands of years. And then as sea level rose, the sand dunes came in, dammed the creek, and created Laguna Puerca, which means pig lake, hog lake, dirty lake, mud lake, not very complimentary. So now it's called Pine Lake. Here's the view of Mud Lake, as it was called about 1910. And you can see there was a lot more water in the lake in those days, because since then, water has been taken from the lake for the golf courses and for irrigation purposes, although there's less and less of that taking place today. Again, here's Pine Lake as it looked in 1937, looking south. And here's some of the Parkside boys swimming in the lake in 1903. This was a small inner dune lake located in what today is called Jordan Park, off of near Arguello and Geary. Of course, it's long gone. It was called Kelly's Pond. Supposedly had great duck hunting. So people fired guns all over the Richmond district in the old days. Oh, by the way, the old name of the Richmond district was the Park Presidio district. And there was Lake Geneva, which of course no longer exists, but it was located where if you're on San Jose Avenue, where you drop down into that valley and then come back up on Alameda Boulevard on Geneva Avenue, that was Lake Geneva. That's why it's called Geneva Avenue. And it's long gone, as I say, but this is a map from the 1860s. And this is Mission Creek flowing through the Mission District. And way in the background, you can see Mission Dolores. Right there. Corona Heights, Twin Peaks. So this is from about 16th and Bryant Street, where Seals Stadium would be built in 1930. I used to go to the Seals games when I was a kid. This is Laguna Honda, a natural lake that this picture was taken in 1862 when it was being converted into a reservoir for drinking water. Laguna Honda, similar to Mountain Lake and similar to Laguna Puerca or Pine Lake, was created by sand dunes, which dammed the creek that carved the canyon. And as sea level rose, the dunes came inland, creating two lakes in this canyon, Laguna Honda and another lake that I'll show you in a second. So this is Laguna Honda 1862. There are absolutely no trees in the picture. So this is Mount Sutro. Um, Laguna Honda Hospital would be right there. It's funny because I ride the 43 and the 44 bus every day, and I talk to people who work at Laguna Honda Hospital, and they have no idea why it's called Laguna Honda Hospital. And I have to explain to them it's named after the lake that's right just 2 blocks away from Laguna Honda Hospital. Here's Mount Davidson, and these are the sand hills of Golden Gate Heights where the sand would pour down and create the lakes. Here's another view of Laguna Honda around 1910. You can see the cypress trees have been planted by the Spring Valley Water Company. The eucalyptus are already very large. There's some coast live oak trees here. And this is 1995, looking at Laguna Honda. Many of these trees have been removed by the water department to restore habitat around the lake. Laguna Honda is no longer a reservoir for drinking water. It is used as emergency firefighting water if there is a disaster. Water is no longer pumped into Laguna Honda Reservoir. This is a natural lake now. And here's another view of Laguna Honda in 1901. You can see they just planted the cypress trees. And of course, the planting of the cypress trees destroyed all the native plants as the trees got taller, shading the native plants and dropping lots of leaf litter and moisture onto the native plants. I mean, in those days, we could have just gone out and plucked the cypress trees out by hand. And this is the slope above Laguna Honda, Lake Honda, showing the diversity of native plants that still exists there, only because the trees were never planted on this site. Sutro planted the trees up above, and down below the Spring Valley Water Company planted the tree. So here we have Indian paintbrush, native Dudleya, native succulent, soap plant, California sagebrush, very rich habitat. And it's managed by the water department, and the water department pays the Natural Resources Division to help manage the site. The Native Plant Society also has regular work parties behind Lake Honda. And the slope behind Laguna Honda is a rich habitat for the bay checker spot, fairly rare butterfly. And here it is on Ranunculus californica, California buttercup. A close-up of the bay checker spot. And there was a time when they sent goats out to eat up all the plants, the invasive plants as well as the native plants. And a lot of people were upset about that because when the goats eat the plants, then they have to shit the seeds all over the slope, and if the seeds go through their stomach, it gets scarified, and the seeds can easily germinate. So it doesn't do anything to really stop the weeds unless you did extensive follow-up, which didn't really occur. Across the street from Laguna Honda, after the Loma Prieta earthquake in 1989, some of these houses slipped off their foundation because they had never, when they were built, they did not pile drive down to bedrock. And so they had to build this gigantic retaining wall. And in order to do that, they had to strip away all the native plants on that slope, which was predominantly dune scrub. And it's pretty sad because, as you can see, there's not a blade of grass left there. Well, since then, Jake planted lupin there, scattered seed. I planted buckeye trees. Um, there are native plants there. It's pretty diverse, but a lot of weeds spreading. And this was the second lake. There was a second lake down at 7th and Lawton where Clancy's Christmas tree lot is, where the pumpkin patch is, and now the Unified School District has turned it into a parking lot for contractors working at the University of California at UCSF, which really pissed me off because you would think that the Board of Education would understand that when you accommodate the automobile, it just creates more problems in the city. So this area here has all been cut away. All of this has been cut away. Loxley Street is right there. But this lake is completely gone now. It's probably inevitably going to be housing for teachers and staff of the Unified School District. One thing about Laguna Honda and all water department property that you have to worry about is water department property could be declared surplus property by the water department, by the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission, and it could be auctioned off for housing. So we always have to stay on our toes to make sure that that doesn't happen. The only department whose property is protected is the Recreation and Park Department, where in order to sell off rec and park property, it has to go before a vote of the people. An example being the Mount Davidson Cross, which was sold to the Armenian Church. It had to go before a vote of the people. We'll talk about some of the native trees of San Francisco. This is Woodward's Gardens at 14th and Mission, as it looked in the 1880s, with the Protestant Orphan Asylum in the background. And these are all coast live oak trees. I've got a close-up of that. All native coast live oak trees. And Woodward had all these rare plants and animals on his property, and people were always looking through the fence to see his exhibits. And finally, he started opening it up to the public, and it became a very popular place for people to go. But there was no alcohol served here because Woodward made his money at the What Cheer House downtown. He was an avid non-drinker. He opposed liquor, and that's why he called his restaurant the What Cheer House. There's no cheer here. What cheer? But these are coast live oak trees. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And here are coast live oak trees native to Golden Gate Park in the Deer Glen, which is now the AIDS Grove. For a time, it was called De La Viega Dell. And this was actually Jake Sigg's beat. These are not deer, these are elk. But anyway, some of these oak trees are still there today. And this is looking at the Bay District Racetrack from the Oak Woodland above Coon Hollow in Golden Gate Park. This would be Fulton Street. The racetrack was located between Arguello and 4th Avenue. I believe it opened in 1874. This might be opening day, and it lasted until the mid 1890s. But these are all coast live oak trees. And many of them are still there today in Coon Hollow. Coon Hollow, as it looked in 1995, you can see USF in the background. These are the native oak trees as they've gotten much larger. Coon Hollow is not named for raccoons. It is named for Mayor Coon, who gave money to the development of Golden Gate Park. William Hammond Hall, who put together the first plan for Golden Gate Park, was opposed to anything being named after human beings in Golden Gate Park. He wanted everything to be named after naturalistic names, like the Deer Glen, for instance. There's another street down by the Eureka Valley Library that's called Pond Street, and people think that that is because there used to be a pond there. No, it was named for Mayor Pond. So again, we're looking at the oak woodland behind the Conservatory of Flowers. This picture was taken in 1879. These are oak trees, also a lot of planted pine and cypress. Here's Lone Mountain in the background, part of the USF campus today, with Archbishop Alemany's cross at the summit, Oddfellows Cemetery. This is a painting showing Lone Mountain looking across the sand dunes, Lupinus chamasonis in the foreground, and a mother hen with her chicks. This is Camp Merritt, which was located between Arguello and 4th Avenue and went all the way to California Street during the Spanish-American War. It was there from 1899 to 1901. And these troops were sent to the Philippines to fight the Spanish. But by the time they got there, they were fighting the Filipinos, who wanted their country to be liberated, not only from the Spanish, but from the Americans as well. And here's Lone Mountain with Archbishop Alemany's cross at the summit and Oddfellows Cemetery. And you can see the columbarium over here, which still survives to this day. Here's the view of Lone Mountain. Here's Geary Boulevard right here. So we're looking from Laurel Hill to Lone Mountain with Mount Sutro in the background. This would be about 1900. Geary Boulevard was originally called the Point Lobos Toll Road, where you had to pay a fee to ride out to Ocean Beach and the Cliff House. This is Lone Mountain showing the arroyo willow trees that existed on Anza Street that were all destroyed for the building of housing on Lone Mountain for students and staff. So that was too bad. It was a wonderful bird habitat. Here's Lone Mountain after the great snowstorm of February 6, 1887, that dropped 7 inches of snow in the western part of San Francisco. Again, Archbishop Alemany's cross at the summit. Again, Oddfellows Cemetery. And another view of that snowstorm. Here we are on Shotwell Street between 20th and 21st. Anybody who had a camera during that snowstorm took pictures. And all of these houses are still on Shotwell Street. Go to Shotwell between 20th and 21st Street, and all these houses are still there. I'd like to talk a little bit about Golden Gate Park. The birds of Golden Gate Park from 1931. The most prominent bird in Golden Gate Park was the California quail. There's no quails in San Francisco anymore, unless they're reintroduced or find their way here. Here you see a picture of a covey of quail in front of McLaren Lodge in 1926. And here's the same location as John McLaren is being serenaded with bagpipes for his 80th birthday. Another view of Golden Gate Park showing the midwinter fair in Golden Gate Park in 1894 to show off the new park to the rest of the world and to show off San Francisco's winter climate, to show that we don't have uh, the great snowstorms as often as they do in the eastern part of the United States. So it's a great place to do business. Lone Mountain in the background, the 300-foot tall Bonet Electric Tower, Buena Vista Park, Stowe Lake, and a night shot. Electric lights were a newfangled thing in those days. And here again is the Bonet Electric Tower. This is when they're demolishing the buildings after the fair was over. The deal was, okay, you can have the fair, but get rid of all the buildings when the fair is over. That was John McLaren's request. And when they were slow in getting rid of the Bonet Tower, McLaren had his workmen put explosives underneath the legs of the tower, and he blew it up. And you can see in the background Grandview Park sticking up on Golden Gate Heights. Unfortunately, some of the buildings remained, for better or for worse. The Fine Arts Museum remained because D. Young was one of the people who established the Midwinter Fair, and the D. Young Museum remained and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And now it's a huge monster in Golden Gate Park. I mean, I love art, but is that huge building appropriate for a park? Here is the second band shell in Golden Gate Park during the Midwinter Fair. There again is the Bonet Electric Tower. This was as I said, the second band shell. And the first one was in the music concourse. And so we played around a little with AI to see if we could make this in color. And there it is in color. For better or for worse, it's in color. I mean, if you really knew AI, you could make all these people move around, even though they're all dead. And this is the park nursery as it looked in 1922, before Kezar Stadium was built. You can see this apartment building is still at Stanton and Frederick. It's got a bike shop at the bottom. There is the emergency aid hospital where the Natural Resources Division has its office. And here's the same spot in 1995. Boink. This is the way we treat Golden Gate Park. I mean, this to me is really sad, because this is acres of Golden Gate Park that could be used for recreational purposes. I guess this is recreational parking. And I've been in the park since 1948. This is me. As you can see, I'm pissed off even in this picture. That's my dad and mom. And this is the meadow just to the east of the Academy of Science. And it became a place where my brother would sunbathe in a G-string. And then all these other nature lovers, naturalists, or do I call them naturists, but they would start hanging out and exposing themselves. And photographers with telephoto lenses would be hiding in the oak trees to snap pictures of them. So this is now called Sun Worshippers Meadow. Another native tree, we were talking about the trees in San Francisco. This is the beautiful California buckeye at 22nd in Pennsylvania, right above the Caltrain station. I hope it's still there. This would have been the original Bay Shore. And in Father Pellou's diary in 1776, He said there were hundreds of horse chestnut trees along San Francisco's Bay Shore. Well, horse chestnut trees are the buckeye trees, California buckeye. And this is a beautiful buckeye tree that I believe is probably dead now at Willard North and McAllister. It was planted in the 1880s. And these are all buckeye trees on one of the Marin Islands. We were doing a tour of the bay, and I thought these were all plastic bags that had blown onto the trees. And I said, "Oh man, look at all those plastic bags!" And I was told by a member of the Audubon Society, "No, Greg, those are herons, great blue herons, and snowy herons, snowy egrets, all nesting on the buckeye trees because this is a nature preserve. So you got all of this diversity of wildlife. It's just amazing. And this is kind of a remnant of what San Francisco would have looked like. And this is a bay tree, a bay laurel, behind what is now senior housing across the street from Mission Dolores, which used to be the Notre Dame School. And this is one of the largest bay trees that I've seen in San Francisco. And it makes sense that it was there because Mission Creek was known as the Creek of the Little Laurel Trees. The non-native trees of San Francisco. This is the view from the William Ferdinand Lang Dairy. This would be Cole and Carl, where the bull is in the bullpen. He's not warming up to pitch in a baseball game. He's waiting to meet some female cows. And this house is still on Parnassus, although it's been converted into an apartment building. And this is all trees planted by Adolph Sutro starting in 1886. Another view of Mount Sutro planted by the trees being planted by Adolph Sutro to create jobs for the city's unemployed, to get a tax write-off for potential lumbering, and to make the hills of the San Miguel Rancho, which he owned, look more like the Black Forest where he grew up in Europe. And you can see the Garfield statue, the roof of the Sharon building, and the original location of the Francis Scott Key statue. Looking across the inner sunset from Strawberry Hill around 1892, this is the Strawberry Valley pumping station that would pump water up to the top of Huntington Falls, up to the top of Strawberry Hill. The water came from the Laguna Honda watershed that flowed all the way from Mount Davidson, Twin Peaks, Mount Sutro, all the way down 7th Avenue into what became Stribing Arboretum. And this would be Lincoln Way, H Street, and Mount Sutro with the new saplings, no UCSF yet. And the Olympic Club had a track and field facility over here. Here's UCSF when it was called the Affiliated Colleges. It was affiliated with the University of California. The land was given to the university for a medical school by Adolph Sutro. And these buildings were built in 1895, 96. And I wish they still were there, and that was all there was. But now UCSF has expanded to such a point, it's gobbled up huge chunks of the inner sunset by using the power of eminent domain. And they're building two more giant buildings up there. I don't see how Mount Sutro can survive under that weight. Speaking of Mount Sutro, we're looking at again the non-native trees planted by Adolf Sutro. This is Clarendon Avenue, where you had to get permission to enter the forest, or the plantation as we should call it, from the gatekeeper who lived in this house, which is still, this house is still on Clarendon. No, this is not the Sutro stewards doing habitat restoration. They are extending Clarendon through Sutro Forest. Although I need to point out that the Sutro stewards are doing a lot of work on Mount Sutro, restoring habitat, restoring creeks, just an amazing job. And if you want to give donations, they're always open to getting donations to do habitat restoration. And don't forget to donate to the Yerba Buena chapter of the Native Plant Society as well. So here we are in 1912, looking at 7th Avenue. The Garden for the Environment would be here. We're looking south. Again, this is Mount Sutro, all the trees planted by Adolf and his crew. And this would be Forest Hill in the background. And you can see all native plants here in the foreground. And this is the dense Sutro forest as it looked in 1934 from Golden Gate Heights. And there's my grandmother's house right there. And I remember as a kid watching them tear down the entire west side of Mount Sutro, cutting down all the trees. And this took place in 1953. And I remember that. And I remember because I was scared that the bears were going to run out of the forest and attack us. But I was just 5 years old, so I didn't know. And this would be where that second lake was located, which is now the parking lot for UCSF. This would be Warren Drive going up this way. And this is more of Sutro's plantings. This is Edge Hill. Kensington Way would go right along here, where the photographer is standing, about where the West Portal Tunnel would be located. This is Mount Davidson. This is Sherwood Forest. The cross would be located right there. Portola Drive right here. And this is the southern extent of Sutro's plantation, going all the way to Ocean Avenue. So he planted with his crew, he planted all the way from Parnassus Avenue all the way to Ocean Avenue. This is the abandoned Ingleside racetrack, Ocean Avenue right here. A lot of wildflowers where the OMI district is today. Same view in 1995. I climbed up on somebody's roof to take this picture. And what remains of many of these planted eucalyptus, pine, and cypress, where habitat restoration is not taking place, is a big mess. So you have the trees collect all the moisture from the fog and the rain, drips it all down, and is perfect habitat for Cape ivy, English ivy, Himalayan blackberry. And then eventually the ivy climbs the trees and kills the trees. Here, this is not habitat restoration. This is clear cutting of Sutro's plantation to build Mount Davidson Manor, Balboa Terrace, taken from the Ingleside district on an Ocean Avenue. Here's the Ingleside district. And we're looking at that wonderful sundial. And up here in the OMI district, Ocean View, Merced Heights, Ingleside, this is Merced Heights. And up here, there's habitat restoration that takes place on this rocky hilltop at the summit of Lakeview in Ashton. And you can volunteer there. And here's a little boy posing at Lakeview in Ashton with Mount Davidson in the background. And here's the Ingleside district from a postcard showing as it looked prior to the building of all their residential neighborhoods, just covered with sky lupin, thousands of them. Twin Peaks as it looked in 1901 from 20th and Noe Street. The peaks, of course, are named Noe Peak and Eureka Peak. This would be Christmas Tree Point, where they used to put, this is now the parking lot. To the early Californians, the peaks were known as Los Picos de la Choca, which means the breasts of the Indian maiden. There weren't a lot of women around in those days, so. This is Castro Street, Noe Valley. This is a display of California poppies as they shaped it into City Beautiful 1915. The City Beautiful movement included the planting of poppies and native plants all over the city in preparation for the Panama Pacific International Exposition, which was a World's Fair. Here's Twin Peaks. This would be Noe Peak, cattle grazing, where we do a lot of habitat restoration. This is the dedication of the Twin Peaks Reservoir in 1912. All the politicians are speaking down here. All they had to do is just open up this and all the water would have rushed in. But this reservoir is the uncovered reservoir, which goes to the hydrant system of San Francisco and what was put in as a bond measure after the 1906 earthquake and fire. The building of Twin Peaks Boulevard with Mount Davidson in the background. Whoops. This is the north side of Twin Peaks. All of this is gone now. This was all coastal prairie, grassland, wildflower fields, and this would be Twin Peaks and Clarendon. Tank Hill would be right there. The Panhandle, Calvary Cemetery, Golden Gate Park. But this would have been all wildflowers. I'll have to make this an AI color picture. And this is where the parking lot on Twin Peaks is today. Christmas Tree Point, where they had the city Christmas tree. And unfortunately, it's now a parking lot. And it is also where the police have their radio towers. Twin Peaks in 1940. And you can see even as late as 1940, it was pretty undeveloped. This is where Clipper Street was going to be cut through. This is Twin Peaks after the snowstorm of 1953. No, I'm sorry, 1951. But I do vaguely remember that as a kid because my parents made a snowman out in front of the house. These are the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts up on Twin Peaks looking down at the city. It's 1926 because the Mark Hopkins is under construction. There's the Fairmont and the telephone building. And now you can barely see Yerba Buena Island because of all the high rises. Here's 1953 from Twin Peaks. And you can see it's predominantly grassland, with a little bit of scrub, a little bit of coyote bush. But the reason that there's very little scrub here is because the fire department would burn the peaks uh, every summer to prevent fire. And I remember that because we would go up the Twin Peaks, and they also burned on Mount Davidson. And we go up there and find the burnt garter snakes, the burnt lizards, and collect them. Pretty sick, but that's what we did. And here's some of the wildflowers on Twin Peaks taken in 1995 with pearly everlasting and lizard tail. Lizard tail. Here's the coast rock cress above Burnett. Erebus, coast rock cress, beautiful wildflower. And of course, the fritillary affinis, which is the checker lily or mission bells, one of the most beautiful of the wildflowers. And this is, of course, Douglas iris on Twin Peaks, monkey flower on Twin Peaks, Nootka reedgrass, which is on the north side of every tall peak in San Francisco, Mount Davidson, Twin Peaks, and a little bit on Mount Sutro. Here's the sky lupin blooming on Twin Peaks in 1995. It's an annual lupin. And of course, this is also an important habitat for the mission blue butterfly and Mount Sutro in the background. The Natural Resources Division has been doing a lot of habitat restoration and has also reintroduced a lot of native mission blue caterpillars to the site to so the mission blue can have more habitat. They got the permission to take some of the caterpillars from, I believe, San Bruno Mountain and maybe Montera Mountain as well. I'm not sure about that. And of course, this is Lupinus albifrons, which is the primary larval food plant, host plant for the mission blue butterfly. This is the mission blue butterfly photo taken by Edward Ross, who was one of the most knowledgeable people when it came to insects at the Academy of Science. And he actually thinks that he may have been the person who collected the last Xerxes blue butterfly for display purposes at the Academy. He actually admits that. He didn't know it was a bad thing at the time. And it's the first butterfly to go extinct that we know of in the entire world, the Xerxes blue butterfly. This is the Western garter on Twin Peaks in my hand. And here's some of the early habitat restoration on Twin Peaks. There's Jake, of course, Jim Rhodes. This was probably taken about 1991, before there was a Natural Resources Division. So removing French broom with the weed wrenches. This is Kite Hill, originally called Solari Hill, with Mr. Solari's cow grazing. This would be right here, right below Twin Peaks in the Eureka Valley neighborhood, one of the 32 significant natural resource areas. It was much larger when this picture was taken in 1930. And here we are looking down Market Street in about 1890, because Nobby Clark's Folly, the Queen Anne Victorian, would be built here in 1892. This house and these two stick Victorians are still there today. This is 18th Street right here. And this is the Serpentine Rock, which used to extend all the way over Market Street, and they had to use explosives to blow it up to extend Market Street. It was called the Dolores Cut because it was right at Market and Dolores. That's where the Mint sits today. Here is Tank Hill, Mount Olympus, and Buena Vista from Twin Peaks in 1906. The water tank was built in 1894 by the Spring Valley Water Company. This is the way it looked in 1914 with Mount Olympus, with the Triumph of Light statue on the summit, Corona Heights, the Gray Brothers Brick Factory. So we're right at Clarendon and Twin Peaks Boulevard. Another view of Tank Hill from where the 33 turns at Clayton and Market. That's the Juice Miller House, which is the oldest house on Twin Peaks, built in 1864. It's still there today. And this was when it was an electric streetcar, where the streetcar would have to reverse its poles to continue to the Haight-Ashbury and to Golden Gate Park. These are kids posing for the photographer as they're getting ready to extend Market Street beyond Castro. And here's Tank Hill in the background. All of these houses are still there today. And in 1977, we had to fight to save Tank Hill to prevent it from being developed with 20 single-family houses. And we would stand on street corners, getting people to sign petitions, giving them flyers to describe when the public meeting and when the hearing was going to take place before the Finance Committee of the Board of Supervisors. And on September 28, 1977, 400 people attended the hearing, and the Finance Committee agreed, and the Board of Supervisors eventually agreed to acquire Tank Hill with open space acquisition funds. That's what the funds were for. That's what the voters voted for when it passed in 1974 for a 15-year program, which acquired many of the hilltops that we now enjoy as significant natural areas. As a matter of fact, the city sold off Tank Hill in 1960 as surplus water department property for $230,000 to the Twin Peaks Land Company, and then bought it back for $650,000 in 1977, 1978. I don't know the exact date, but the approval was in 1977. Here's some of the photos that I took on Tank Hill in the 1990s, when I used to go up there and manage the hill and learned all about the native plants. That's how I learned about native plants. And these are all gold fields. But unfortunately, I don't go to Tank Hill anymore. I just don't live in the neighborhood anymore. And I've seen photographs of what this area looks like now. And it's just all down to bedrock. It's just been trampled. And I don't know if there's any native plants on this site where the gold fields were. This is Ranunculus californica, California buttercups. See, when we took care of Tank Hill, we would put barriers up to keep people on the trail so they wouldn't trample the wildflowers. And a lot of people hated me for doing that. As you can see, the barriers. What right do you have to do that? Well, I'm sorry about that. This is part of our natural heritage. This is Tritilia laxa ethereal spear. I think they've changed the name of ethereal spear, but I don't know what it is anymore. And Clarkia rubicunda on Tank Hill. And this is Clarkia rubicunda with a Sphinx moth caterpillar on it. Also on Tank Hill, a beautiful display of Dudleya, and of course the rock outcrop at the summit, which has been graffitied a million times. When we first started managing Tank Hill, it was broken bottles, tires, uh, parts of car engines. It was just a total dump site. And then, you go up there every day and manage it. And before you know it, it's perfect. But I don't manage it anymore. And I feel guilty, but I can't do the whole damn planet. Looking from Tank Hill to Mount Olympus with Sutro's Statue of Liberty. Here's a, whoops, excuse me. Here's the view of Mount Olympus in 1912. This is Clifford Terrace. This is Ashbury Street. And this is probably all wildflowers then. And you can see the statue, which was unveiled on Thanksgiving Day, 1887. It was an enlargement of a statuette that Sutro had seen in Europe by the Belgian sculptor Antoine Verts. And he liked the statuette so much that he had an enlargement made, similar to the statues that used to be at Sutro Heights, where Sutro lived. And it depicts the goddess of liberty holding the torch of liberty, with the demon of despotism trying to grab the sword that she has taken away from him. So this is a perfect rendering of President Donald Trump, because he's the demon of despotism. In the background, we can see a house where I used to go and drink alcohol with Ed Dunn, who founded the recycling center in Golden Gate Park, Ed Dunn Sr. And this house was built in the 1880s and has since been demolished. And you can see Strawberry Hill in the background in Golden Gate Park. Again, this picture was taken around 1887. These are pictures of people posing in front of the statue. My mother grew up just 4 blocks away from here, and they called it Statue Hill. Here is Buena Vista Park with a lot of coast live oak trees. Looking to Buena Vista Park from Alamo Square, you can see still has sand dunes on it, because it was a sand hill originally, and then the sand poured down into Sans Souci Valley. Here's the view looking north from Buena Vista. As this is Baker and Oak Street. This is the Department of Motor Vehicles is right here. And this is the entrance into the Panhandle. And these were the earliest planted trees in Golden Gate Park because they were the closest to downtown. This apartment building is still at Lyon and Haight Street. Looking from Buena Vista to the lower Haight, this is Page Street, City Hall, the Call Building before the 1906 earthquake and fire. It's about 1902. Here's the city burning during the 1906 conflagration. This is the ham and eggs fire, which burned white as the rest of the fire was dark, but the ham and eggs fire was white, possibly because of the redwood lumber on the Victorians that were located down there. A lot of the buildings downtown were stone and brick. A view from Buena Vista Park in the 1940s. Still native plants there, although the trees were getting bigger. And this is the Buena Vista West at Waller Street. This is where the children's playground is in Buena Vista today, but as you can see, there's a lot of coast live oak trees. Many of them are certainly indigenous to the site, but I'm sure that many were planted probably by McLaren, along with the cypress and the eucalyptus. Corona Heights from the Eureka Valley neighborhood. You can see this whole slope is now gone, but the rock formation is still there, and you can see how it changed. It was quarried by the Gray brothers starting in the 1890s, so they could use the chert rock for cheap brick, which they would sell to the public. So this is the quarrying operation. This is Castro and Market right here. The Castro Theater would be right here. State Street goes right up this way. And if you go up to State Street, you can still see remnants of the brick factory sticking up next to Corona Heights. Mount St. Joseph's Hospital up here and Buena Vista Park. This is a little bit later as the Gray brothers are building their brick factory. And this is Upper Castro and the Castro cable cars. The year is 1901. And as I said, the Castro cable car system would be, the powerhouse would be destroyed in the 1906 earthquake, but they built another powerhouse in Noe Valley so that the cable cars could run from 18th and Castro to 26th and Castro. Now, some rich dude could probably rebuild that cable car system and they could name it after themselves, but what a tourist attraction it would be taking people from the Castro to Noe Valley. This is a family posing with Corona Heights smoking in the background. And this is the annual lupin blooming on Corona Heights as it looked in 1995. And the reason it's called Corona, Corona means crown, and this is the crown of chert rocks on the summit of Corona Heights. And this is an artist's rendering of what Corona Heights looked like in the 1940s. And here's a shouldn't touch that one. I touched the wrong button. This is a photograph that I took of Corona Heights around 1995. And I must confess that prior to me learning about native plants, I planted these stupid trees on Corona Heights thinking that I was doing a good deed for Corona Heights. And when I learned about native plants, I went back there and started cutting down the trees that I'd planted because I knew I had made an environmental error. And then Reckin Park came after me and said, you have to pay us to replant the trees. So all this controversy because nobody was maintaining Corona Heights. What they should have done was the gardeners who are on Corona Heights, as soon as I planted those trees, they should have gone up there and just plucked them out. But they didn't do anything. And so, I mean, a lot of this might have led to the creation of a natural resources division, a natural areas program, because, people could go to these natural areas and plant their Christmas trees or do whatever they want. Oh, no, not that one. This is Mount Davidson as it looked before the trees were planted. These rock formations are still there, of course. And this is Mount Davidson in 1923, just before the Stanford Heights Reservoir was constructed. But when you compare the pictures, you can see that same slope. And here's Mount Davidson in 1928, says Mariloma Park. This is one of the early wooden crosses. There were 4 wooden crosses before the concrete cross was built in 1934. And this is the Stanford Heights Reservoir that had just been constructed. And all of these arroyas would lead down to Isleas Creek going through Glen Canyon. And here's an AI shot that we did. Here's Mount Davidson in 1927, Portola Drive, Stanford Heights Reservoir. Tower Market would be right over here. Looking from Mount Davidson across where Mariloma Park residential neighborhood would be built. Here's Twin Peaks, Mount Sutro, and Sutro's trees extended all the way from Mount Sutro to Mount Davidson. And we're all familiar with this site. Anybody who's done habitat restoration on Mount Davidson, there's the cross in the background, and the Natural Resource Division and the Native Plant Society have done hours and hours of work replanting and weeding this area just below the cross. The tallest natural site in San Francisco at 928 feet. Here's the stairway built by the WPA, which we're all familiar with if you go up to Mount Davidson. We've done a lot of restoration work here, a lot of Nootka reedgrass there. Still a lot of weeds because the trees are still dripping water. This is the view from Mount Davidson looking to downtown around 1928. It's an ad, it's a commercial for cars showing that a car can get to the highest point of San Francisco. So this would be Red Rock Hill, one of the three hills of the Diamond Heights and Twin Peaks. Here's about the same view in the 1950s. Again, one of the three hills of the Diamond Heights before it was redeveloped. And this is the view from Mount Davidson during the East Bay Hills firestorm of 1991. This shows the huckleberry growing on Mount Davidson, the only place where huckleberry occurs in San Francisco. Although I think I've seen one or two above O'Shaughnessy Boulevard. And the Mission Bells, the fritillaria on Mount Davidson in a photo taken in 1995. But I must tell you, since it's blooming at the time of the Easter sunrise services on the summit of Mount Davidson, when people go up for the sunrise worship, they pluck out the mission bells and carry them up with them. So the mission bells cannot drop seed. There's not that many of them up on Mount Davidson anymore. This is Billy Goat Hill at 30th and Castro with another Gray Brothers quarry gobbling up that part of the lower slopes of Gold Mine Hill. These houses are still there today. A lot of wildflowers. This is taken in 1915. That same year, one of the Gray brothers was shot and killed at this site, by an irate employee because his wife was sick and they weren't paying him. And it ended the Gray brothers quarrying operation. Here's the same view taken in 1995 with the redevelopment that took place on Gold Mine Hill. So this is the Diamond Heights, Red Rock Hill, Gold Mine Hill, and Fairmont Hill are the three hills of the Diamond Heights. It was declared a blight area so it could be redeveloped so federal funding could come into the developers to scrape it all away. The Diamond Heights Neighborhood Association went all the way to the United States Supreme Court in 1954 to ask the Supreme Court to not declare Diamond Heights a blight area because it was not a slum. It was just farmland and open space. The Supreme Court would not hear the case, and it was developed. These are views of Diamond Heights just before it was developed in this is 1958. And I remember it well because I went to Silver Tree Day Camp and we would hike up over Diamond Heights. And there was a guy who would go rabbit hunting in the morning. And we were always scared, not of his gun, but of his dogs. He had a whole pack of beagles, but they were very friendly dogs. And here's another view of Diamond Heights in 1958. And you can see Glen Canyon in the valley, O'Shaughnessy Boulevard, Edge Hill, and a golf driving range where McAteer High School would be built. Here's the building of O'Shaughnessy Boulevard in 1934, where they took all the debris and just poured it down into Glen Canyon to accommodate the automobile. It created jobs for the unemployed. It was, as I said, a WPA project. And here are the wonderful rock formations above O'Shaughnessy Boulevard. This land is owned by the Public Utilities Commission, the San Francisco Water Department, and more of the Water Department land off of Marietta Street, a wonderful natural area, although it's not under the Natural Resources Division, but the Natural Resource Division is paid by the Water Department to maintain this. I must tell you that this wonderful Douglas iris colony has been badly overrun by poison oak and blackberry the last time I saw it. But it can be restored. And here's Aguilicia formosa, the crimson columbine, one of the indigenous crimson columbine, of which there were very few, but they are very easy to propagate. And now we're seeing them all over the city because of so much propagation and people buying the plants and people using it for habitat restoration. This is located in Monocot City, which we call it, which is Department of Public Works property right above O'Shaughnessy Boulevard, near the O'Shaughnessy Clubhouse, the Mariloma Park Clubhouse, I should say. Looking down into Glen Canyon in 1942 with all the Diamond Heights undeveloped and Twin Peaks in the background, the rec center. And looking at Glen Canyon from the opposite direction, you can see Isleas Creek flowing through the canyon with two tributaries. This is what we call Columbine Incline, because there's crimson columbine growing on this slope. This is practically impenetrable now because of the thickness of the native blackberry, the native poison oak, but it is still extremely diverse. And here's a view taken in 1995. So 1942, 1995. Not only have the eucalyptus expanded, but also the native arroyo willows have expanded because there are no grazing animals in the canyon to control the saplings, although there certainly are quite a few coyotes down there. This is Glen Canyon as it looked during a May Day festival at what was called the Mission Zoo in those days. 1903, looking at Glen Canyon, looking south. And again, this would be Columbine Incline. O'Shaughnessy Boulevard would be cut through right here. And this is the slope below, above O'Shaughnessy and below Marietta. Here's habitat restoration with the Native Plant Society and the Natural Resource Division around 1995. These ladies are posing on Martha Hill, which is one of the 32 natural areas under the jurisdiction of the Natural Resource Division. It's small. It's above Glen Canyon, above Bosworth Street, kind of separates between Glen Canyon and the Sunnyside district. And it was originally called Martha Hill because of the Martha Real Estate Company. And this was the day that the name was changed from Martha Hill to Dorothy Erskine Park. And this is Mayor Feinstein, the general manager of Rec and Park, Tom Malloy, and there's Dorothy Erskine. Dorothy Erskine was one of the leaders in the fight to create an open space acquisition and park renovation program in 1974. And so many of the sites that are now natural area were acquired with the funds that came from that program. And there's my friend George Cruz, who I knew for many years at the Photography Center. We were both photojournalists. McLaren Park in 1926, originally called Mission. So these ladies are having a picnic with the cow is also having a picnic. And in the background, we can see Mount Davidson, Glen Canyon, Twin Peaks, part of the Diamond Heights. Here's the dedication of the name change from Mission Park to McLaren Park in 1927 with Bernal Hill in the background. And to celebrate the new name, here's the recreation and park people going out and planting thousands of eucalyptus, pine, and cypress trees to destroy the native plant community. But they didn't know any better in those days, so what can you say? And here's John McLaren receiving a gift of the American flag from the Civil Works Administration of the New Deal. No, there's no women there. And here is ranunculus, California buttercups in McLaren Park near the Crocker Amazon Park, which is right over here, just off of Geneva. This is an Anna swallowtail caterpillar. It looks to me like it's on Angelica, but I may be wrong. Its larval food plant is Lamatium. And these are Johnny Jump Ups, Viola pedunculata in McLaren Park with Bayview Hill in the background. Again, taken in the 1990s, that's a long time ago. Here is Bayview Hill as it looked in the 1920s, sticking out into San Francisco Bay. There's a tidal marsh right there. Bayview Hill in 1924 from Key and Lane Streets. Does it do that? Okay, this is looking from Brisbane back to Bayview Hill, sticking out into the bay. All of this has now been filled in with debris and garbage and whatever they can find to dump in there. This hill is completely gone. It's where Recology has its offices and its yard and all of its trucks. And this is Bayview Hill. This is the summit of Bayview Hill, the rock outcrop with Mount St. Joseph and the Catholic Orphanage for Girls in the background in 1916. The same rock formation in 1995. This is the slope on Bayview Hill as it looked around 1910. The same slope after it was cut away for roadways, for dumping purposes. This side of Bayview Hill had to be acquired with open space funds because it was still in private hands as late as the 1980s. Here we are, an aerial view looking down on Bayview Hill in the 1940s. As you can see, it's still a peninsula sticking out into the bay. And here's the building of Candlestick Park, where you can see they chopped away huge parts of Bayview Hill to fill in the bay to build Candlestick Park. That's why the Recreation and Park Department was responsible for maintaining the lawn at Candlestick Park, because it was their property, because they took the land from a city park and dumped it to create the anchorage for Candlestick Park. Of course, this picture was taken in 1959, and I was a big Giants fan. I didn't know anything about ecology. This is what we call Indian Head Rock on Bayview Hill. It's since lost its chin, it's fallen off. Clarkia rubicunda on Bayview Hill. Goldfields on Bayview Hill. Bernal Hill behind the Mission District and what is it? San Francisco General Hospital. San Francisco General Hospital. Yes. And this picture was taken in 1910. And just after they completed building Bernal Heights Boulevard, which is now closed to cars, in 1936. And here's an Anna swallowtail caterpillar taking nectar and possibly laying eggs on its larval food plant, Lomatium. And here's Jake Sig giving a wildflower walk on Bernal Hill in the 1990s. This is Palou and Phelps, which this is, there are 3 lots that are still in private hands right here that could be built upon. And I hope that doesn't happen. But if you want to see those lots, they're on Quesada Street. And it would be nice if the city would acquire these 3 lots. But in this day and age, housing is more important than anything, even though it's not sustainable. The population of the world continues by 230,000 every day. There's 230,000 more people on the planet. I mean, it's not sustainable. These are on Palou and Phelps gold fields growing on and All Hallows Church, which is the centerpiece of the Bayview Hunters Point, built in 1886. And this is the Balboa and Great Highway slope, which is now a native plant garden. This was part of Playland at the Beach, Topsy's Roost, and it eventually became the site of Family Dog on the Great Highway, Friends and Relations Hall. And now it has been, all these buildings are gone, and it is a native plant garden. The Presidio, as it looked when the trees were just being planted by Major Jones. And this is the celebration of the centennial of the United States in 1876, where they had a fake war going on, supposed to resemble the Civil War. And you can see these tidal sloughs in the Presidio. At high tide, the salt water would come way inland, creating all these tidal marshes. The view from Presidio Heights. And you can see the trees of eucalyptus trees being planted in straight rows in the Presidio. And this is some of the serpentine grassland of the Presidio. The eucalyptus are getting taller. 1895. So Major Jones actually planted these trees before Adolf Sutro planted his trees. And in the Presidio, unfortunately, it's covered up with this stop share sign. But this is the raven manzanita, which is an extremely rare and endangered species. And in the Presidio, in order to protect the raven manzanita, discovered by Peter Raven, a native San Franciscan, the pine trees were cut down around the raven manzanita to give it more sunlight. So this is one of the early examples of removing non-native trees to protect rare and endangered species. The Arctostaphylos franciscana, which was first recorded in 1905 by Alice Eastwood, was thought to be extinct in the wild. If you read this sign, it says extinct in the wild. This was a plant that was taken from the Laurel Hill Cemetery by Alice Eastwood, and by cuttings and by seed was propagated at what eventually became the Stribing Arboretum, and also at the Academy of Science. So, but it was thought to be extinct in the wild, and it was the only place where you could see it was here in the Presidio. I'm sorry, in the in Golden Gate Park. Here's habitat restoration taking place in the Presidio above Baker Beach by the San Francisco Conservation Corps, one of the first major habitat restoration projects. This was done when it was still a national park, and they're removing ice plant. This is the beginning of the restoration of Lobos Creek Valley by the National Park Service. This is Crissy Field as it looked in the 1880s. Crissy Field as it looked during the Panama Pacific Exposition. And Crissy Field being turned into an airport in the 1950s. And here's the tidal marsh being created in the 1990s. Along Land's End, there's a lot of native plants, including this wonderful display of Dudleya on the cliff right above the ocean. Along the San Francisco Bay Shore, we had Yerba Buena Cove, named for the Yerba Buena chapter of the Native Plant Society. No, I'm only joking. Yerba Buena Cove. San Francisco was originally the pueblo of Yerba Buena in 1847, and eventually it was changed to San Francisco in I believe 1848. Montgomery Street was the waterfront. By the way, if you go, you can see this picture come alive on AI if you type in on Google San Francisco 1800s. San Francisco 1800s. And they have an AI where the picture actually comes alive. And it's like you're floating over the San Francisco of the Yerba Buena Cove of 1847. This is why it was named for. It was named, San Francisco was originally named for a native plant, Yerba Buena, the wonderful mint that was all along San Francisco's Bay Shore. I mean, that's saying something. The Native Plant Society in San Francisco was originally named for a native plant, Yerba Buena. Here we are looking from Nob Hill to Mission Bay in the 1860s, across the sand dunes, looking across south of Potrero Hill is a peninsula sticking into the bay where you had Irish Hill, Irish Hill would be here, Scotch Hill, and Russian Hill, the three hills of Potrero Hill. And here's Mission Bay as it looked in the 1890s. So we're looking at the Baldwin Hotel here that would burn in 1898. And again, Potrero Hill in the background. Here's a close-up of Mission Bay. As you can see, people just dumped all their garbage into the bay. There were no environmental controls, toxic waste, tanneries, chemicals, you name it. This is exactly what Donald Trump would love to do because it creates so many jobs. This is Pier 94, which was all bay fill, but tidal action has washed pickleweed and other tidal marsh plants onto the landfill, and it has become a very rich tidal marsh, even though it was all a garbage dump at one time. This is Pier 98, Heron's Head Park, which of course was all a dump site. It's called Heron's Head because it's shaped like a heron's head. And of course, it has tremendous 120 different species of birds, shorebirds, use Heron's Head for nesting and for resting. And it's an important part of the Pacific Flyway, along with all the lakes of San Francisco. And you can actually see eggs that have been left in a nest by some shorebird. I certainly didn't disturb that in 1995. And here's a small tidal marsh in India Basin. I hope it's still there. So you got Al Kurtz, Jake Sig, Ruth Gravanis, and Peter Rupsoff. Peter, as I said earlier, was one of the authors and photographer for the flora of San Francisco, a true expert on tidal marshes. So here's the nursery of the Natural Resources Division when they first started back in 1996, 1997, where they first started propagating San Francisco native plants to be used for habitat restoration. And without the native plants, we lose the native critters like this bumblebee, the pelican at the Muni Pier at the foot of Van Ness, the fence lizard, the Newt Gingrich? No. Newt Rockney? No. And remember when the sea lions arrived? This was the first year that they arrived. I took pictures of them at Pier 39. The people had to move their yachts because they could no longer moor there because it would interfere with these marine mammals. And so Pier 39 was really pissed off about it because they were losing all that rent from the yachts. But then all these tourists started arriving and people wanted to see the sea lions. It was ecotourism in San Francisco. And they spent so much money at Pier 39 when they went to see the sea lions, going to the restaurants, buying food, that the Pier 39 owners were so happy with the sea lions and ecotourists that they erected a statue for the sea lions. So we close this presentation by saying the sea lion in the center says, "Thank you very much for sitting through this. Bye bye." Okay, that does any questions?
Thanks so much, Greg. That was amazing. What a collection.
Absolutely stunning, dude.
Yeah, and your
Yeah, I mean,
story.
most of this stuff I just have off the top of my head, and
Yeah.
sometimes I forget.
Dude,
But
you're a brilliant historian, and thank you so much for sharing all that
everything's
with me.
connected to everything else. That's the whole
Right.
thing.
Absolutely. And that was a tour de force for sure, man. We're stunned. I hadn't seen most of those. I know it's probably available on that SF History site, but
Yeah, if you go to Open SF History, um, I've scanned almost all the pictures on Open SF History, and my collection of historic San Francisco photos, negatives, lantern slides, they are all going to the San Francisco History Center at the main library because I realize that now that I'm 77, I don't think I'm going to live to be 98 like Jake Sig.
We can only hope.
I've just been too pissed off all my life. Jake has a
oh,
tendency to try to. I mean, he kind of has an Eastern philosophy about life. He takes things without getting too angry about it.
Mhm.
But I get angry,
well, there,
and
there's
it's not good for your body.
No, but we appreciate all those personal stories. They really added to to our appreciation of what those sites are like and how they've changed over time.
yeah, we learned so much, man. That was
Yeah,
really
confessing
amazing.
that I planted those trees.
No,
I mean, I
but you
normally
learned
don't do
from
that
it.
publicly,
Yeah.
but confessing that I cut down the trees. Just 40 years ago, I would have been up Schitt's Creek for saying that I cut down the trees.
Well, today
Well,
they don't like it
Well, no, well,
either.
they've taken out 800 trees at Lake Merced,
Yeah. Well,
and
that
it's
was
amazing that has not um, become more newsworthy. I think that they have a few articles about it,
yeah.
but
Well, I think people
people
are
are not
learning.
getting as upset because they realize it's good for Lake Merced. And
right,
Lake Merced is more important than the eucalyptus, pine, and cypress and blackwooded acacia trees.
right.
Absolutely. No, I mean that's an amazing story that you just told. Thank you so much for that.
Okay, take
Thank
care.
you.
All right, bro.
Appreciate it.
Good night, everybody. Hope to see you next week.
How many people were there?
Over
About
70.
about a
Okay.
hundred, I think. So a lot of people got to see it.
Thank you.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.